Okay. And we're recording. So wonderful. So greetings from Tokyo. Once again, this is Daisuke, and I am joined once again because this is, I believe it's the second time, although we have known each other for much longer than that. This is Dave at the great YouTube channel Cinema Dave Media. So Dave, welcome again.
Well, Daisuke, thanks so much. Yeah, the second time. This is great. So great to see you.
Likewise, my friend.
Yeah.
And it's always good to be able to talk with you. And now we're in September, closely approaching October 2020. And last time you and I spoke about a number of things, but one of the things I think we spoke about was a general discussion with some examples about the works of Sidney Lumet. And today we thought it might be interesting to talk about another filmmaker, Alfred Hitchcock, and plus
Right.
some other films along the way that we thought might be interesting for discussion. 'Tis the season
Absolutely.
after all.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah,
so
before we get started, I was going to
yes,
say
please.
one of the things I really, of course, I love your channel, and one of the things I love about your channel, and I seem to be doing these days, is I'm going back and watching some of your older videos. That's what I tend to do, I think, with channels that are my favorites as I go back and I start, and then they're very rewatchable. So I love watching your collection videos and some other things that, some other videos that you put up on your channel. It's such great content. I really enjoy it. So one of the things that I liked is when you were talking about your history as you started and your time in university and things like that. And I think we talked about this, off the video about the fact that I grew up in Western Massachusetts and you went to school in Connecticut and things like that. So when I was watching that video talking about your university experience, it made me remember something that happened to me while I was at college. And I thought you might find it interesting. It might be a good kickoff to this video as well as Halloween in general. And that is when I was in college, I took a screenwriting class, and the instructor was a woman by the name of Kate Phillips. I don't know if that rings any bells. Kate Phillips. Kate Phillips happens to be the screenwriter for The Blob. And so I took a class with her, and so I wanted to let you know about that because she told the greatest stories. I mean, of course, I love movie stories and things like that. I can't remember anything in particular that she mentioned, but she was just a great professor. She did also a speech class and she did a screenwriting class. And so I wrote we had to write screenplays and things like that. So she was able to critique a little screenplay that I wrote. It wasn't very good, but she, she looked at it. But the thing I wanted to do is, someone had asked me on my channel if I had any other movie-related items that are not a DVD or a Blu-ray, and I forgot to mention this. And I thought, well, I should mention it tonight, considering that she wrote The Blob, and since that's a fairly scary movie, I suppose. At the end of the class, she gave everyone a gift, and I've kept that gift all these years, many, many years. And she gave me this book of Yeats poetry, which I have right here. She gave me this, and she gave me a card right here. This is the card she gave me. Hope this is interesting, but can you see that all right? And then she wrote a note on the inside, and I thought I'd just read the note from Kate Phillips. She said, "All the best lies beyond the curve of the road. Knowing you has enriched my life. Thank you. Please see page 242, which is a Yeats poem called The Choice. May all you knowingly wish for be yours, and may you have the wisdom to leave the windows open." And I've kept this card with me for the longest time, and she signed it. And it just reminds me to think of life in a different way. I think of the words that she wrote there, to leave the windows open, to think of the possibilities, which is basically what the Yeats poem is about as well, The Choice. So I thought I'd open up this video and just let you know that, because I hadn't shared it anywhere else and we hadn't talked about it. I thought it'd be a good surprise for here.
That is very cool. Wow. That is something else. I
Yeah.
am. That is something else. And my goodness. So, oh my goodness. So, are you gonna? Oh, I'm so honored that you would share that.
Yeah.
That is so neat. And are you going to perhaps talk more about that and maybe talk about it maybe on your channel should the opportunity present itself?
I mean, it's possible. People have asked me to share maybe some theater stories or some stories about when I was at, in college and things like that when I was doing theater. So this might be one of them. But I can't believe I completely forgot because most of the memorabilia I have is just DVDs and movies. I don't really have, a lot of people have autographs and things like that. I don't really have that stuff. And I don't have other, people collect figurines and things like that. I really don't do that. It's just the movies. So, but I was really honored to be in her class, and she was just a wonderful woman, great spirit, and I've just kept this with me my whole life. And of course, the blob is represented in the Criterion collection too. So I don't happen to have the blob actually. I need to get that, but but I know it's in there. So
Ah, I love that.
yeah,
So may you have the courage to leave the windows open.
leave the
Mm,
windows open. Watch for
mm,
all the possibilities and things in life. And so I thought that's really great. Um, so
mm.
I know we want to talk about Hitchcock, and of course, Hitchcock can be very popular at any time of year. And so maybe I'll make a few opening comments just about Hitchcock as a man. I really feel like, and of course, we don't want to spoil any of the movies either, right? I mean, we talked a
Right.
little bit about that. We don't want to really spoil it. So if we start to go in that direction, let me know. But um, I, Hitchcock for me, when I start to watch one of his films, if I start to revisit his films, I should say too that I've always loved Hitchcock films, for many, many years. And I'm more familiar with maybe the more popular of the Hitchcock films. But I did a few years ago, Turner Classic Movies, or TCM, in association with Ball State University, did a class on Hitchcock. I don't know if anyone else has talked about that, but it was a free class, and you basically had some interviews and some extra things, and there was some extra supplements where instructors from the university would talk about Hitchcock and his techniques and things like that, and then present a series of films. And it was in concert with the programming on Turner Classic Movies, or TCM, here. So I took that class, and it was one of the best classes. I keep hoping that TCM is going to bring back these classes. So I don't know if that's something that they have in Japan, but I thought it was great that it was just free and available, and you got a certificate at the end of it. It was a big deal. Um, and one of the things I notice now when I revisit his films is I watch one film and I want to watch all the films again. So I don't know if that happens to you, but I get immersed in it very quickly, and I just want to watch everything from the beginning. So I don't know if that happens to you with certain filmmakers, but it happens to me, and I watch one and I want to see them all again.
This is very interesting to me because I have also been very much a fan and admirer of the works of Alfred Hitchcock. This is a filmmaker whose films that I have seen since I was very, very young because of VHS tapes that my parents would have purchased for me at an early age for all of us to see. But I ended up watching them more than anyone else in my family. So these were titles like Notorious or Spellbound or Rebecca. And I remember seeing The Lady Vanishes at an early age. I remember seeing the remake of The Lady Vanishes at an early age, and the 39 Steps, and not so much some of the. I remember some of the films were a bit hard to get back in the day, or not hard, but very impossible to get back in the day. So I couldn't see for the longest time films like The Lodger or Blackmail, and I remember like everyone else, I think, who was in a similar position, would marvel at a lot of the pictures that you could see in the Hitchcock Truffaut book,
Yeah,
where you could see blackmail, the pictures of blackmail for the first time, at least for me anyway.
right.
And also watching documentaries and seeing for the first time the only way I could see clips from The Lodger, for example, and that was so thrilling to me. And then, of course, the as you say, the more maybe the Hollywood films and the films that he is that were very popular among audiences and critics alike. So those films I remember, I've always remembered knowing and seeing, whether they be on TV when I was growing up or something of that nature. So I I I think I've known the works of Hitchcock, um, perhaps. Yeah, I would say that among all the films I've seen, or all the filmmakers I've seen, I think the works of Hitchcock are among those that I've seen the most and the earliest in terms of a body of work. There have been gaps along the way, but I've managed to fill those gaps with subsequent physical media releases and the like. But
Right.
I think overall, yeah, this is the filmmaker's filmography that I feel like I've known among the most in my own journey. So this is I'm looking forward to this conversation very much. And I guess with that, what I'd like to say then is that you and I, we've planned ahead, and we have picked what we like to say are just some of those Hitchcock film recommendations, or just picked a number of films. I've picked 3, and Dave, you've picked 4, right?
Right.
And so what we'd like to do is, and we don't know what the others' choices are. These aren't, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but the ones that you've picked aren't necessarily your absolute favorites,
Right.
but they are the ones that you wanted to talk about today.
Right.
They
Right.
could be your favorites, but they don't necessarily have to be.
Yeah, that's actually
And
right. I mean, yeah, I mean, because we talked about it, every film could be my favorite. Of the filmography. There's so many great things to like about it. But yeah, these are films that are probably at the top of my list for sure.
okay,
But as you and I talked about before, sometimes our favorites are changing over the years, or I might be connected to a specific film more than, at another time. So
yeah, yeah, totally agree with that, because as you know, and I'm sure many other people know, his filmography is quite immense, and it spans almost a whole century, almost, right? And so that's a long time, and so we have a large body of work to choose from. And now we have Blu-rays and DVDs and 4K and all this with Hitchcock films, and so it's just a wealth of resources now. But what I'd like to do, let's get things started off
sure,
with
sure.
our choices. So let's go in this order. So I'd like you to present one, and then when you're finished,
Sure.
I'll respond, and then I'll present one, and then we can go, in order like that. So Dave,
That's
let's
good.
start with your first choice here. What is one Hitchcock film you'd like to talk about and recommend to all of us?
Right. So the first film I'm going to recommend, and I've got some media here too, so we can show everyone what you might be able to get this on as well. And the first film I'm going to talk about is one of the first ones that I saw when I was a kid that exposed me to Hitchcock, and that is The Birds, which I think The Birds, for me anyway, is when I first saw the movie, it's it's a horror film, really, in many ways, right? And so it's available on this. It may be available in other places, but correct me if I'm wrong. But I have this set, which I think a lot of Hitchcock fans may have this set. I'm just showing this. This was released a few years ago, and I know there's been some 4K releases as well. And so The Birds is included here. I'm not sure if there's a separate release of this. I'm not sure. Maybe on DVD prior to this, but this is the collection I have, and I think it's still available. And I think for anyone that wants to get into Hitchcock, this is probably a good place to start, because it may not cover the silent films as an example, but it's going to cover some of the other films in his filmography. But I hadn't seen The Birds in a long time, and I wanted to reconnect with it since I saw it when I was younger, and I've probably seen it a few times through the years since then. But one of the things I noticed about this particular viewing is that I really picked up some new things about it. And again, we don't want to spoil anything here, but one of the things I discovered is nothing really happens. in the first hour of the film, other than one small attack. And I don't know if we want to give kind of the general theme of the movie, but basically it's a nature gone wrong type movie from a horror standpoint, right? With the birds being, the danger in the movie, if you will. And Daisuke, please stop me if I start to spoil anything here. Okay. So the thing I realized watching it through is that nothing really happens in the beginning of the movie. And so there's this anticipation, I think, with Hitchcock, which he's trying to work on and trying to build up. And so it's a very simple story to begin with, and really a story about relationships and things like that. Hitchcock also famously talked about, and one of the things I noticed is maybe more of a technical thing, but he frequently uses what he calls the double print in this film, meaning that, he's working with, these actors, and he's working with birds, and he has to, there's one scene where Tippi Hedren is one of the main characters in the movie, and she's rowing a boat across a lake, and a bird has to come down and kind of hit her in the head. And he talks about this. Actually, one of the things I started watching too, and one of the things I love watching with Hitchcock, is his interviews. I find his interviews so funny, especially with Dick Cavett as an example. So I don't know if you watch those, but I love watching those, and I could watch those over and over again. But he talks about the double print in that, I think in that interview, and where he has the shot of Tippi Hedren, and then she's got some apparatus under her wig or whatever she's wearing that will blow some air or make some blood basically on her head, and then he's got another print of a bird swooping down, right? And I thought that was really interesting, and I think since I learned about that, I've been watching for the double print in some of these movies. But the reality is, The Birds to me is also a very, not only is it a nature gone wrong story, but it's also, the main character is obviously going through some type of crisis. She's seeking things. And I made some notes here too. By the way, the other thing I do when I watch movies in general, if I want to remember something, is I start taking notes. And I think with Hitchcock, I start to do that quite a bit. So I'm just going to take a look quickly just to have my notes here too. So with the films I've chosen too, there's also this sense of, this is true, I think, with some of the other movies, but this kind of like loss of innocence, or that there's evil, there's evil someplace that you don't expect it to be, right? It starts out as a very simple kind of romantic story, and all of a sudden something happens, and you're not quite sure how it happened, why it happened. And so you're sort of involved in this mystery and this thriller when it started out as a simple romantic story. So that's one of the things I really took from it, that I was really surprised to see, because when I was a kid and I saw the birds, I thought it's all these birds attacking people all the time, and it's really not that at all, right? So I don't know what you think, Daisuke, but that's the impression I got seeing it again all these years.
Yeah, and that's really great. And I love The Birds, the film The Birds, and it's 1963, and Tippi Hedren, and we have as you say, it has a very interestingly constructed narrative structure, and such that it could be seen as being separate movies, two separate movies put together in an interesting way. Perhaps some might say in a strikingly original way. And but what that does is, it does, I think, a number of things. It means that if people can look at this film, I think, in from different perspectives. As you indicated, you described it as being a horror film, which I think it is, a nature gone wrong film, that kind of subgenre, if you will, of horror, which I think it is, obviously. It's also, you say, a human drama, a romance, and it has that as well. And it has a focus on character relationships, which I think is very key, because one of the things that is very important in terms of horror and suspense is essentially knowing who our characters are. And I think by the time things pick up with the the birds in question, I think we already get a sense of who each of the characters is, what he or she is about, and what their motivations might be. And then we see that, and then we see a kind of crisis applied to
Right.
the situation. And I think that's a very important thing. Also, let me just say one more thing, which is that it's like how should I put it? It can operate on different planes of
Yeah,
viewing. You can
absolutely.
look at it as a very as what it is. You can look at it also as a one huge metaphor at play. In other words, it's a metaphor for the things that we see in the first part of the film,
Right.
or the first part of the film is the buildup for the second part of the film, or a combination of the two, or perhaps one is. I think it's all subject to a different, potentially multitude of interpretation.
Yeah.
And I think that's due in primary part to this very striking narrative structure that you point out, I think, very nicely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's different too in that, we talked about this before, but viewing a film over a number of years, as you change, your experience of the movie changes too. So that was really striking to me this time, because as a kid in high school and even probably into my 20s and 30s, I probably saw it more of as a straight horror movie. But I'm thinking of a scene as we're talking through this too. I'm thinking of one particular scene with Jessica Tandy, who plays the mother of Rod Taylor in the movie. There's a crane shot, and this is maybe it's not a crane shot, but it's over her head when she's in bed, and she's very upset about what's been happening. And she the thing that I was really struck by is that she says, "I'm so alone." She's very, in other words, there's drama that's happening with these characters that's independent of the birds. It just happens to be the birds as a trigger for some of the things that are happening in their lives. And she's, Tippi Hedren is coming into the environment to potentially have a romantic relationship with Rod Taylor. We don't know, but Jessica Tandy is also there as the mother, and she doesn't want to be alone. And that's a very real human thing, not necessarily related to what's happening with the birds at all, right? And so I feel like even that story, you're so right that it operates on so many different levels that I don't feel like I really saw before this viewing that I did. I think the other thing too, just to kind of talk about it, the scenes that really moved me were more of the analysis that happens in the bar, as an example, when things really get out of hand. And they've got they have a bird expert in there, and she's weighing in on the situation. And I remember one scene in particular too, and again, please stop me if you think I'm spoiling this too much. I'm not really giving away hopefully giving away anything, but Tippi Hedren walks to the end of the bar, and people are hiding in the hallway. And there's this indication that by her appearing in this town, she's caused this in some way. And so you're kind of struck by the other element of it, in that it's a mystery or something that she's potentially caused by her presence. And so you kind of wrestle with that as well. And you're saying, well, is that possible? Could that be? Could she have really caused this to happen? And you don't really know, right, in the movie, but it's definitely suggested that people seem to want to blame her because she's new, right? We haven't seen her before. We don't know how she's impacting our environment. So, the film is very complicated, where on the surface it appears like a classic horror film. And of course, the birds are very scary. So, I want to mention one other thing too about it. This is also maybe a very technical thing that Hitchcock has talked about, and that is there's a famous scene in the film too where Tippi Hedren is outside a schoolhouse and she's smoking a cigarette, and there's a jungle gym behind her, and one or two birds begin to appear. And again, please stop me here if you don't think we should reveal this. But what happens is Hitchcock very specifically said when he does a chase film, when he does a chase scene or anything where someone's being rescued, as an example, let's say there's a scene where there's an ambulance rushing towards a person that's injured. Rather than showing the ambulance and the person that's injured or the person that's in jeopardy, he stays on one thing. He stays on the ambulance going there, so that you, in your mind, you're anticipating what is happening with the other person or the person that's in jeopardy. And that's exactly what he does with this particular scene. And he talks about it in that they show a couple of birds showing up. You, in your mind, are thinking, I wonder if more birds are going to show up, because we've seen attacks before like this. She smokes the cigarette, and he stays on Tippi Hedren for the longest time, and does a couple of cross cuts back and forth to the jungle gym, and then waits a very, very long time and just lets her smoke the cigarette until she follows a bird with her eyes that comes back to the jungle gym, and it's filled with birds, right? So that, I think, is genius, because he is engaging you in the film in a way that you, in your mind, you're thinking, what is happening here? And you're anticipating, and he's the master of suspense. Let's face it, right? This is the suspense right here, right? Not pursuing the cross cut and just doing the holding on her, letting you think about what's happening. That is suspense.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's a very famous scene that you bring up. And I also think what you said about it's a classic horror film, but it's also much more complicated than that. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think one of the things that scene as an example of, and you also mentioned the diner scene, which is also very famous, and what happens before, during, and after that. And in fact, they follow each other, right? And so but this film is in many ways Hitchcock at some of his most experimental in terms of his presentation of the craft. And I think I would say that we get a lot of playful experimentation with cinema in this film, and I would dare say in many of the films that follow. I would say probably we get a lot of inventiveness throughout his career, of course, but here we get a lot of very, I would say, kind of surprising and oftentimes shocking different ways that he's trying to convey information, whether the use of freeze framed shots to try to convey movement, which might or might not work depending on who you are, or the use of shots to convey horror and violence on the body, or the narrative structure that you alluded to earlier, or the manner in which certain characters are introduced and then retracted from the narrative in whatever fashion, be it due to the birds or otherwise, and things of that nature. The use of sound is of course very key. The use of and I say sound in terms of the lack of musical score, and the idea. So, in other words, these are examples of where the film operates on an incredibly technically proficient level, yes, and it's a Hollywood film, yes, but it's also highly experimental, and I'm really glad you mentioned it today. Are there any final parting comments you have about the birds before we move on?
Yeah, the sound. I'm glad you mentioned the sound too, right? The sound, especially at the beginning of the movie, is very agitating. It's very agitating, the sound of the birds, right? So when you start to hear that, whether it's bird sounds concatenated in some way, that it's very jarring, if you will. And I think as a kid seeing that movie too in high school, I think I was more seeing some of the things that you just pointed out too, with what could be considered potentially graphic horror, really, in some ways, right? There's a scene of another gentleman who's in a room, and it's a very close up of his face, and so those kind of things, seeing that when I was in high school even seemed very graphic to me. The other thing I want to point out, just as kind of a final thought, is, and Hitchcock talks about this, Hitchcock is also a very funny man. As a man, right? He's a very funny guy to listen to, and he loves practical jokes, and he loves the idea that humor can kind of dissipate this tension, which he does from time to time. And one example in The Birds is, I don't know if you remember this, but Tippi Hedren is driving up a road, and she's got the lovebirds in her car, and there's one shot, it's very, the birds are doing this, right? They're moving back and forth in the cage. And so you laugh at that. It's a little bit of a break in the tension. And so he does that very effectively. And he's talked about that idea there too, because he wants to keep the audience on the edge of their seats, but he wants to break the tension a little bit. So he's Hitchcock is very controlling with these movies, right? Very, very controlling in how he wants you to respond, how he wants to interact with the audience. So I love that about him. So what's your pick for the next one? We can move on here.
Oh, thank you. Yes, well, thank you very much for that. And so the choices that I made are ones that I think, well, they're not I don't have a ranking of, well, this is my number one, number two, whatever, but these are films that I really enjoy for certain reasons that I'll try to get into. So the first one is, I have the Blu-rays here. The first one is 1941, and this is starring Joan Fontaine and Cary Grant, which is right here. This is the film on Blu-ray, which is called Suspicion. And this is Warner Archive collection Blu-ray. It's a very nice one with a good documentary. But Suspicion is one of my favorite films from this early 1940s period, because it has Cary Grant and Joan Fontaine, whom I adore, and it has Cary Grant in what could be seen to be a kind of transition role, because we have Cary Grant's persona that we knew from other of his other non-Hitchcock films, but he had a persona in the films that he had prior to 1941, and then here we have that kind of comic persona, but also mixed in with a real hard edge of darkness and instability and chaos, which I think then carries through really nicely into the subsequent films that Cary Grant featured in with Alfred Hitchcock direction. So there's that, and also Joan Fontaine, whom I adore quite very much so, gives a performance that has a really nice arc to it. I think there is a sense of not knowing and wondering, and I think that's very hard to show in terms of acting. I'm not a performer, but I can imagine it. You have to do a lot with your face, and you have to do a lot with your eyes and that sort of thing. And so her position is that which we as the audience member have to attach and hook our sympathies on, because we have to wonder what's going on. Is there a murder afoot or not? Or is there some kind of thing, the suspicion of the title? Plus, there are some very inventive scenes of mystery and suspense. But what I do like most about it, and I'll end on this, which is I like how, similar to The Birds, its focus is on a couple or a relationship. And I should say couple, but in fact, it's not just a couple relationship, although it's that primarily, but it's a relationship dynamic that exists between parents and children, between parents and or what's the phrase? Parents-in-law when marriage is introduced. Friends, old friends come in, and how that plays into the equation. How this can change or not change when one is married and settles down, and the need for financial and emotional stability, and the need to for some characters like the Johnny Aisgarth character by Cary Grant, the need to grow up and that sort of thing, and that how figures in, and how that is possible or impossible. And then you overlay this with a kind of whodunit murder mystery, but it's a whodunit murder mystery that isn't quite the typical type of murder whodunit mystery. And so that's what I really like about this film. So this is Suspicion. That's my first.
That's a great film, and it's interesting that you picked that one too, because we're starting to get into maybe the theme of Hitchcock also, that there's something not to be trusted about what you're seeing, about maybe some ordinary things that you're seeing, right? Which is a general suspicion that I think he has in a lot of films that he conveys with his characters or with his camera technique too. So, and you know, I like to look at him as a filmmaker also who has some history, which he's been pretty open about in some stories, in that he was scared at an early age. And I don't know if you had seen that with the interviews and things like that. He famously talks about his mom saying "boo" when he was younger, which is probably a very young age. But one of the things he talks about that I think he's talked about in a few interviews is that he did something wrong, I guess, when he was younger, and he was put in a jail cell for a short period of time, and so that led him to not trust the police and not be, and be afraid at a very young age and really not be trusting. So, I like to see kind of how these themes run through his films, and certainly with Suspicion, there's no, it's the same type of thing, right? He sets up an environment where you're not sure what's happening, or you're not sure who to trust, or you're not sure what's going on, right? In many cases, or there's a mystery that you have to try to think about as you're watching the film. So I think it's a great choice.
Oh, thank you. Yes, yes, and yes, the story about the when he was a little boy. Yes, this is what we do to naughty boys.
Yeah.
So that's the story that is oft recounted in many a Hitchcock interview. Yes. So yeah, so that was Suspicion. So that's
Suspicion.
mine. So let's keep on this conversation. So what is
Okay.
your second choice for us, my
See,
dear
now
friend?
I'm the same as you, and it's really hard for me to pick favorites. It's so hard because there's so many films we could potentially talk about. I had such a hard time picking some films that I wanted to talk about too, because um, so let me just, okay. So I have two that I'm kind of working towards some uh, of my absolute favorites, but you know what I'm saying? It's so hard to pick. I don't think we can really have a conversation about Hitchcock without talking about Psycho a little bit. So I'm going to pick this one next. And this is the Blu-ray digital for Psycho. And the reason I got this too is because it's got the Psycho uncut on it. And I'm sure there's a lot of people right now picking up the 4K releases of for the films. But I have seen this film many, many times. And I watched it again over the last couple of days, and I was just completely amazed by it again. What an amazing film this is, and for so many reasons. And again, I'm sure Psycho could be a video in its own, but there's so many things I like about it. There's so many things too where you're starting off at the beginning of the movie with a relationship and a character that seems like a very simple story, and she decides to make a decision at the beginning of the film that launches her into a situation that she doesn't want to be in, obviously, right? Now, I don't know, again, how much we want to get into Psycho and what happens in Psycho and things like that. So Daisuke, I'm sure most film people know about Psycho and the shower scene in Psycho and things like that. But if we don't want to go into too many details, we don't have to. But obviously the shower scene is iconic. And Hitchcock talks about it all the time as a very famous, we know from a cinema standpoint, it's a very famous scene. 78 cuts, 52 seconds. Now, Hitchcock in one interview says 49 seconds, but there's a documentary out there called 7852, which is really a 52-second scene. But it's one of the best scenes in cinema, I believe. I mean, I really feel like, from his filmography, it's so iconic. And he talks about it also, the fact that there was really no, again, I'm trying to go delicately here so I don't spoil too much, but in the shower, there's some violence that occurs in the shower, and the weapon never touches the body in the scene. And you can very clearly see that. And he did that purposely and so all of the violence that's occurring in that scene, to me, a lot of it's happening in our heads, right? Because there's nothing that's really overtly graphic about that particular scene, right? And he talks about also about the crew that made him a model for the body that's in the shower, and so that there would be something to use the instrument against and he never used it, right? He famously never used it. So I don't know how much, again, how much we want to get into the details. I don't know if this is one of your picks either, but this is a classic Hitchcock film that I think everyone should see.
Oh yes, it's no, that's fine. I think don't worry about don't worry. You don't have to worry about the spoilers or not. If you want to talk about details, just feel free to do so. That's not a
Okay,
problem.
sounds good.
And so the um, yeah, this is a very I mean, it's been often spoken about and discussed and dissected and redissected and argued about and debated on and relied upon in terms of many a cinema discussion. It can be said to be not just one of the staple hallmarks of Alfred Hitchcock's filmography, but of course it could be said in many ways to be one of the staple hallmarks of American cinema. And for many reasons. And I think one of the things that is so remarkable about it is, again, uh, again, I can't add anything substantive to the discussion that hasn't already been said. But if we think about how film and what's the phrase? The relationship between the viewer and the piece of cinema that is playing. We often think of some kind of image or action that's being presented as an image, and then we as audiences react. And I think you've alluded to the fact that Hitchcock tends to be able to read and to manipulate the viewer psychologies, if you will. And I think the film Psycho is the ultimate example of that kind of viewer psychological relationship that Hitchcock as a filmmaker and his collaborators have been so deftly and skillfully been able to manage and do so. I mean, even down to the way that the film is marketed back in the day in terms of the hyping up of the secrets. And not just that, the way that violence is presented, which is a big deal, and the way that certain aspects of crime and uh, uh, crime, and more crime are being presented here. And it's another indication of the fragmented structures, narrative structure that is fragmented both in narratively and also visually and orally. Right. And then uh, what is it? I was going to say something else, but oh yes, and I do love the way that the manipulations continue all the way to the very end. And there are so many manipulations in terms of where you think the narrative will go, and then suddenly it snaps back into a very chilling and violent arena. And so those are my general impressions of Psycho. Now, this is a film that I've I've seen so often that it's like second nature to me. And so I always assume that people like me know this film and they've seen it many times. And so I always have to remember that not everyone has necessarily seen the film Psycho, but I can't remember a time in my life where I didn't know Psycho.
Right. Yeah. Same for me.
Yeah, it's that. I mean, I think it's a big deal for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So good choice.
I'm glad,
I like it.
Yeah, I'm glad we talked about it early too, because I think we're also in this area where the villain is sort of the hero in a way, because you're of the film in some sense. And I think sometimes that happens where you're just interested in Anthony Perkins, and Anthony Perkins has an amazing performance in this movie. And I just really enjoy watching him, watching his mannerisms, watching, what he's doing, and just the characterization here is very complex. And one of my favorite shots in the movie is maybe one that's not that well known, but when they start to investigate this crime that occurs, he has to present the guest book, and he's eating some nuts or something. and he turns his, this is just I feel like it's a brilliant shot. I don't know why it really sticks with me, but he turns his head sort of like this to the side, and you can see his neck, but he almost really doesn't look human anymore to me. He's like chewing these nuts and things like that. And there's another scene too where he's standing by the lake where he's put a car in this I guess it's a lake or a pit or something like that, and he just turns towards the camera. And I don't think I really noticed that shot so much as I did this on this viewing, because he really, it's a very scary shot. I think it's a very scary shot. Just a lingering glance at the camera, turning around, and you know what's happened, obviously, as the audience. And so I just think this is a brilliant film. And I think, again, it's filled with complexity. It's filled with the same theme of something evil is happening here that you have no idea about, whether it's in your hometown or somewhere else. And this woman who has made a bad choice, and realizes, I think, when she's in the hotel that she wants to redeem herself and go back and fix it, she doesn't have a chance to do it, right? She's already made that choice. She's already, her bed has been made, if you will, and she's, that's what's happened. I was also struck too by the details in which, after the murder occurs, the detail at which Hitchcock goes through Anthony Perkins cleaning up the bathroom, because I don't think I'd really noticed that so much before. There's so much detail to that to the aftermath, that I hadn't really noticed really before, because you're so jarred by what occurred, by the murder that occurs. And so anyway, I feel like this is a whole discussion, right? We could talk about Psycho. I could talk about Psycho for a long time, I feel like, and it's so iconic. But if you haven't seen Psycho yet, please go see it, because it's one of the best films, I believe, of Alfred Hitchcock and in cinema in general. So.
Oh, great! Yeah,
But I think
thank you.
I think you're up next. I mean, we could talk all the time about Psycho, but.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you. That's very kind of you. And so let's see. So you spoke about The Birds, and then Psycho, and then I spoke earlier about Suspicion from 1941. And so the next film I want to bring up is, this is one that I'm not sure if it's on a lot of people's radars when it comes to Hitchcock films. It should be, because it's very technically proficient, and it's so much more. It's quite a harrowing drama that has a lot of, there are some pretty great scares to this. And it's from 1949. And I have this on a Kino Lorber Blu-ray from the United States, Region A. It's this, which is called Under Capricorn. Have you seen this film?
I haven't seen this one, so that's one that and it's on my list too. That's one that I have not seen, so I'm really interested to hear about it.
Yes, Under Capricorn is I think, a very underrated Hitchcock film. Has a really nice performance. Performances, I should say. Joseph Cotton and Ingrid Bergman. And it has a story that is very reminiscent of these. It's a Gothic tale, and it feels like, well, let's take an example like Rebecca, an earlier work. So it has that similar type of Gothic sensibility about it. Plus, it is in gorgeous color. Plus, it has a lot of technically brilliant aspects that are reminiscent, obviously, to the long take or one take approach that we saw in something like Rope. So we have, I think, a lot of stuff going on in here. Plus, we have a foggy, hazy type of mystery enveloped in a romance tale that goes in ways that are very, actually, quite revealing. And so it's a Gothic tale, it's a romance tale, it's a suspense thriller, and all of that entails. But these great Gothic tales often had at their heart, wonderful human relationships, and human relationships are oft populated with the unknown and the scary and the and what is real and what isn't, and it's all here in this film under Capricorn, I would say. I think
That's great.
it's been I think it's a part of the reason why it's been maybe not so much part of the discussion is because of its relative lack or maybe relative lack of availability. It's not like it hasn't ever. It's always been available in some form or another. I understand. I remember seeing it as a kid on a pretty rough looking VHS, I think, but it's been a little bit harder to get until recently. And so now we have this, which I think is a great presentation. And this has an audio commentary track by Kat Ellinger. And I'm a big fan of her work and her audio commentary tracks. So is it the best Hitchcock film? Right, it's up for debate, I think, what the best could be. But this is certainly one that I think needs to be in the discussions more. You can watch it and maybe you might find, oh, it's good, but maybe there are others that I like better, or you might find it's your favorite Hitchcock film. Whatever the case may be, I think there is still so much to be said about this very complex film, both narratively speaking and technically speaking. So this is Under Capricorn from 1949.
Yeah, what a great recommendation that is, and I need to see that right away for sure. Kino Lorber is one of my favorite labels as well, and I have quite a few Kino Lorber titles. But one of the things that struck me too about that is that what you're saying too is you're seeing a lot of the techniques, a lot of the technical elements that Hitchcock is developing over this time, the long take in particular, right, which you see in a lot of films. But that's the thing I like also about going back to some of these earlier films, like The Lodger, which I know is on Criterion, and looking at some of these earlier films and seeing how he started with that, and he just continued to improve it as he went forward. So the long take is just it reminds me of the long take down the staircase in Notorious, and those types of things too. So that's a great pick.
Yeah, thank you. And I would say also that one of the, I think, great strengths of this film, Under Capricorn, and its technical proficiency is, for my money, and I'm not saying that Hitchcock doesn't do this in other films. He does this in other films, but what he does I think so seemingly effortlessly, and yet so marvelously here, is how the technical aspect of how he employs certain long takes, how that it seems to stretch out the atmosphere. And not only that, it lends itself to this sense of inexorable fate, for lack of a better way of expressing it. And that links in so acutely with the narrative focus of the story so well. And I think there are some really demanding camera tricks that don't seem like camera tricks. And it's one of those films that you watch and you don't realize that it's it's not like it's sometimes if you're looking for it, of course it's there, but I think a lot of times it can feel like you're absorbed in what's going on in the performances and you don't realize, oh my goodness, this is still going, this is still one take. So it has a lot of moments like that. So I would recommend this strongly, and it's a great presentation. So it's still available. So this is Under Capricorn. But
I was going to say one of the things you really touched on there too is how immersive the worlds are when you really get involved in it. We didn't really talk too much about this, but Hitchcock talks about this too. But the making of the film is very boring to him, right? Because it's already made in his head, right? Which is why he refers to actors like cattle, because he feels like he's already made the film, so it's just boring to have to put it down here. He's got all the storyboards and he's got all the things already worked out in his head. And so, however, that technique though, or that approach to filmmaking, you and I talked about other filmmakers before too, where I kind of like more of an improv style potentially in some films, or more of a different type of, like with Bergen as an example, right? He's working with a company of actors. There may be some improvisation, some scripted elements, things like that. Hitchcock is very controlled, right? It's very, he's controlling every single aspect of it. And when he does that, you're just immersed in the situation. I mean, I'm really surprised how immersive the experience of watching a Hitchcock film is. So.
Thank you.
So
That's exactly right. But yes, so and there are so many other Hitchcock films, and so with that, let us now move to your third choice. Is it? Yeah. So what is
right
your
now
third choice?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, this one has potential to be my number one film at this point. Okay, but I've got another one to share too. So these two may be tied for number one at this point. The next film I'm going to talk about is Shadow of a Doubt. This is absolutely one of my favorite Hitchcock films, and I really can't say enough great things about it. I watched it again recently, and I made a ton of notes on it as well, because it's just one of my favorites. I mean, again, a classic story of the villain potentially being the hero. There is this idea of some evil coming to a small town. That theme, as well. Joseph Cotten and Hitchcock were friends, and there's an interview. There's a supplement actually on this collection, which we've shown already before, where Hitchcock talks about on location, where they went to a house where a lot of the action takes place, and the story is that they found this old house. It was perfect. The people were so proud that Hitchcock was going to do it. They made the house look nice, and he had to come back and make it look bad again, right? That was the big story that he said. But the other thing too that I like about it, the reason I connect with it also, is because Thornton Wilder was involved in the production of it, where he was a playwright, and he wrote, famously, Our Town, which was one of his plays. And you could almost see Shadow of a Doubt as a stage play, potentially. There's a few scenes you could not do on stage, but for the most part, it has all the elements that, like you were talking about, of a Hitchcock film. It's an early film, right? 1943, if I'm not mistaken. It's 1943, right? Yeah. So, the other thing too is that I noticed some things about it in this viewing that I hadn't really noticed before either, in that there's some very interesting dialogue in the movie. And I wrote down a couple of quotes here too. There's a younger daughter in the movie, and she goes to answer the phone at one point, and she's reading a book. And so it's very annoying that she has to go answer the phone. And she goes to the phone, and she puts a stool up to where the phone is, and she picks up the phone, and she's having this conversation. And someone says something to her, and she says, I don't really care that much about that. And I'm reading this as a quote. She says, I'm trying to keep my mind free of things that don't matter. And I thought that was just a beautiful, maybe a throwaway line, but it's such a beautiful sentiment of that. And it's, I think, something that we go through today. There's so many distractions of things that can get your attention. And she's very, methodically saying, I'm trying to not distract myself with things that don't matter. I just thought that was perfect. Joseph Cotten, of course, has some very, there's a couple of his speeches in that movie that even today, watching them, are very, very jarring, if you will. They're not graphic or anything, but just the language is extremely, I can't even really describe it. It's just, I'm not really sure how to describe it, but he's having dinner at one point, and he's talking about women, and it could be perceived as very offensive. And I think the women at the table consider that to be the case as well. There's one point too where Joseph Cotten, even though so in the story, if I can tell a little bit about the story here, he goes back to this small town, and you think that potentially he could be a murderer. And so and that's what Shadow of a Doubt is really all about. Is he the murderer? Is he not the murderer? There's some detectives that are following Joseph Cotten in the movie. And so I won't reveal that, but That's where Shadow of a Doubt comes from. But there's a scene where he's the uncle and he comes back to visit. And so everybody's happy to see him until they're not sure whether he's the murderer or not, right? So you have this mystery there, but he says, there's a great line that he says he's in bed as soon as he gets there. And he says very stoically, what's the sense of looking back? What's the sense of looking ahead? Today's the thing. Okay. I thought that was just from a just an overall spiritual sense, let's say, that's a great sentiment coming from a guy who potentially could be a killer. Okay. So you're kind of like, and this is where I'm saying too, the villain is almost a hero in a way, because of things like that, because of those types of things. There's so many great things I loved about this movie. One of the other performances in there too, there's a bar scene. I don't know if you remember this, but there's a waitress in the bar who I find hilariously funny, her performance. She comes up and she's got a few lines and I just think her characterization is hilarious. I think Hume Cronin is hilarious in the movie, and Hitchcock talks about casting him, or they talk about the casting where he went in and he said, I don't know if I want to give away maybe the supplement here a little bit, but he talks about meeting Hitchcock, and one of the casting agents, I guess, came out and say, I'm really sorry, we're looking for somebody, older than that. And he said, but as long as you're here, why don't you go in and see Hitchcock? And Hitchcock basically told him, he talked about the location, and he said, when we go to Sonoma County, after we do the shoot, we're going to go to the vineyards, and we're going to grab the grapes, and we're going to squeeze them over our head, drink the wine. Do you remember that? I don't know if you remember that, Daisuke, but, and so Hume Cronin said, I guess I'm hired. So and there's a couple of characters in the movie too, just talking about humor, that talk about murder scenarios and things like that. That's very funny. That's their hobby, to talk about these things. And so I found that, anyway, the whole movie is just an amazing, and it's Hitchcock's favorite, right? It's Hitchcock's favorite movie. And he said that, in the past. So Shadow of a Doubt is my pick. And right now it's at the top of my list. I really love that movie.
Yeah, that's an excellent choice and well described. And you mentioned Thornton Wilder, of course, which is very important. You mentioned Joseph Cotton, Teresa Wright, of course, and others. And the notion of the small American town, and also the quaint American family, and the image of this, and how this is potentially and quite significantly disrupted in a potentially permanent way, is what is, I think, at the heart, or one of the things that is at the heart, of course, of this great dynamic film. And there are many things going on here. The villain or anti-hero, the suspicion around what he may or may not be, the growing suspicions of Teresa Wright, of course, in particular,
Right.
and how that affects her perspective and her viewpoints on the family unit, and the humor that's overlaid there, as well as the way that the image of these actors are used, and of course the persona, if you will, of Joseph Cotton and what he brings to the film, and how that image is either upheld or completely upended, whatever the case may be. And so I think that it's all there, plus so much more. So I think this is a fine choice, one of the best. Yes, I agree.
And I think too, this loss of innocence, I think, which is a common thread too. Whether we perceive life as a good place or a bad place, I think also comes into play, right? Because they characterize Joseph Cotton as thinking all bad things about life, and what that can do to a person potentially versus other views of life. And so Teresa Wright in particular, right, she's going through this loss of innocence, I believe, in the movie. And just I think that theme, that storyline really touches me, because I think in many ways we all go through this. We may be going through this every single day with what's happening in the world today even. So I think that kind of struck me too, things that you may believe, maybe things you believed when you were a kid that don't turn out to be true. and or things that you didn't even realize were going on in your town or in your family or whatever the case may be. I think that's so dramatic. I think that's so important, and so there's so much loss associated with that as well, I feel like. And you know, I could be wrong there, but I really feel like that's so important of a theme. And you really see that in Shadow of a Doubt. I just think it's a brilliant film, and it's a film I could watch over and over again of Hitchcock's, as I could do many of his films. But so
Excellent choice.
yeah. So you're up next, I think.
Oh, great. Yes. So yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, I was absorbed. Yes, in the discussion. So thank you. Yes. Okay. So you have spoken about the three so far. So could you remind us so far what your three films were up to now?
So I started with The Birds, and
Yes.
we did Psycho and Shadow of a Doubt.
Thank you. So, and they're all found in that Masterpiece Collection Blu-ray set that you have. That I have that one as well. So that's right.
Yes.
Could you show that to us again, just in case?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is the one
that's
right here.
So all three of those films should be found in there. Of course, there have been prior and subsequent releases of those films, but yes, okay.
Yeah, and also this one too. We should maybe remind everyone that this is available now. Again, I just got the Blu-ray digital, but there's a 4K of 4 of Hitchcock's films out now, which I think a lot of people are picking up.
Yeah, excellent. So there's that. Great. So for me, my next one is actually one that is also included in that Masterpiece Collection set. But there's a particular version that's included there, and I'll try to get to that in a second. But this is probably a film that I can anticipate perhaps some people saying, why is this here? But I have a reason for this, which is 1969's Hitchcock film, which is called Topaz. Now, I'm going to have to be a little bit careful here. So I have this separate Blu-ray from Japan, which is one of these Universal Pictures release separate from the box set. It's also available on the box set. I've decided to cover up the bottom portion of this simply because it has a little image that I wish it didn't include, because it's one of the most striking images of the film, and in fact it's best left on a surprise level. So I'm just going to cover that part up. But this is Topaz from 1969. The reason why I have this Blu-ray and I have the Masterpiece Collection box set, which you have, is that the film Topaz is included in that box set, the Blu-ray set, but it's the 143-minute version of Topaz that's available there. And so it's a longer version than this, which is the 127-minute version. So this is slightly shorter than the version that you can find on the Blu-ray set. Plus, as some of you may know, there are different endings to this film. And so you can get the version that's the longer version on the Blu-ray set, which has one of the endings, and then you can get the shorter version, which has a different ending. And so, and you can see what the endings are in their own little supplements. So if you don't want to spend money on getting two versions of Topaz, then you can find that in the set, whatever the case may be. But Topaz, I think, is one that's not discussed, I think, because people would consider it to be a very weak Hitchcock film. And if people think it's a weak Hitchcock film, I think they'd be right to think that way. Because for me, too, it's a weak film. Yeah. And it's a weak film because there are certain ways that the characters and situations are presented that might seem a little bit stiff, might seem a little bit too cardboard-esque. But I still find so much great stuff in this film, Topaz. I don't acknowledge that it's a perfect film, because I think it's not a perfect film. But there are not just moments of brilliance, there are many, many moments of brilliance in this film. And so I would urge anyone who has a certain view of Topaz to give it a second chance. And that's because it is a film that I think is also very, very experimental. It does things in terms of the introduction of characters and then the withdrawal of characters that feel in a way like almost like a short story collage of many different characters. And this is, I think, a staple or a trait of an experimental filmmaker. Let me put it another way. The film just introduces characters and then it removes them in favor of other characters that are suddenly introduced, and then removes them in favor of other characters that are introduced. So there is a large tapestry of characters. They're not all directly related in that they don't all know each other, but it's all a kind of network. And so you get a little bit of this story, and then a little bit of this story, and a little bit of this story, go back to this story, and then go to this story, this story. So it has the potential of being very complicated. But what I see is it's like, what can Hitchcock do in terms of suddenly introducing a character and then making us immediately sympathize with this character or set of characters such that we follow this character through their little stories? And so I find that this is a very experimental approach in that vein of experimentalism that we refer to, say, in a film from a few years prior, which is The Birds in '63. So I really admire that approach to this. Also, the tricks here, the camera tricks and the sound tricks, and the way that sound is used and not used, I think are quite brilliantly done. And there is a lot of information going on. There's a lot of information at play, and it feels, in fact, like two sort of epic Cold War stories merged into one. So it might be hard to figure out what's going on and who's who and what's what. But I think that's part of the appeal, which is the confusion of this kind of Cold War espionage film. Um, uh, Again, there are other things about it that I think are quite weak. There are some quite, I would say, bland staging of some of the characters, when they're talking with each other and that sort of thing. I would have liked it also to have used French language when we had characters who are French speaking with each other. I think it would have added a real sense of international. It would have added a sense of global, international world stage, which I think the film is aiming for, but it instead opted for an all English approach, which I think is I mean, I understand it's the purpose that it's serving, but I wish it went for the multilingual or multi-language approach. But be that as it may, even with its weaknesses, I think it's one that has, I think, a lot of strengths to it. And while I don't stand by it as being the strongest Hitchcock film I've ever seen, and in fact, it could be one of the weakest Hitchcock films that I've seen, still, I think it's one that deserves a little bit more attention. There are some flourishes that are so undeniably Hitchcockian, really Hitchcockian, and they come almost out of nowhere. And so there's that going for it, and there's that experimental flavor too, which I was mentioning earlier. And there are some pretty harrowing things that go on there. Not much that's shown on screen, but if you think about what the characters are going through off screen, it's pretty intense and pretty violent stuff.
Right.
So it's a world that's very cold and unforgiving, and it's one that that has a lot to say in terms of the breakdown of human relationships and and how loyalties are tested, as well as being a film that is trying to present this Cold War espionage epic on essentially two world stages. So that's Topaz. And if you're interested, again, it should be in the Masterpiece Collection, or it should be in this separate Blu-ray or in other formats. But I don't know, have you seen the film Topaz? Or
You know what, I haven't seen that. And,
okay.
I think you bring up a good point. And that is, I think sometimes when we're looking at a director's work, sometimes, for me as a viewer and as a collector, I always feel behind, because I always feel like there's some gap in my knowledge. And so I'm glad you brought these things up, because I've had this collection and I tend to focus on movies from a specific time. I believe even in the class that I took, they didn't even get to that point, which so I think you bring up a great point in that sometimes a filmmaker may have a weaker film that you might skip, as an example, and there's some things to really like about it, and some things that the filmmaker is learning as they're making the film too. So this is definitely one, and I'm so happy you brought it up, because as I mentioned, I'm learning, still too. So I may have seen a lot of Hitchcock and really enjoy his work, but then I've moved off to another study, or I'm looking at some other films, and so I forget about certain ones. And I think I'm so happy that you had the choices that you did, because it's just a reminder to folks to study the whole thing, right? Learn as much as you can about filmmakers, and so that's a great recommendation too.
Oh, thank you. And I think a film like Topaz, I think should be seen, or not should, but I don't want to use that word, but I would recommend watching a film like Topaz after you've seen a number of Hitchcock films under your belt. This is not a Hitchcock film that I think is worth checking out if you haven't seen any Hitchcock films, because
Right.
it'll be, I think it's not like many other Hitchcock films, in the sense that it 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 has it has it has the potential to disappoint. I think that's one way of putting it. However, I think after watching a number of Hitchcock films already, and then watching Topaz, I think then one can see. I mean, one of the things too that is that I always try to uh, square in my own head, which is the idea of a filmography versus the film, right? Because I think one of the things that I don't know, I don't know where I fall necessarily, but it's like uh, oh, this film is great because the filmography is great. I don't right. I don't. There's only a certain point that I can follow that kind of conversation, and I
Right.
can't quite follow it, because it's
Right.
ultimately about the film, right?
Yep.
And but with this film, Topaz, I sense that there is a lot of worth in knowing the past and future filmography of Hitchcock in the context of this film when watching this film. So I see that worth and I see that value. And if anything, I think there is a lot of great benefit to watching this film, if for anything, to see how it fits in the rest of the context of the film. Now,
Right.
with that being said, I think it's also worth checking out on its own, because of some of the reasons that I was pointing out, or trying to point out, in terms of the way the character is introduced and then not, and then withdrawn, the relative lack of Hollywood stars, um,
Right.
and although there are many famous actors in the film, of course, but it's that is something that has been remarked upon by many a critic when talking about this film Topaz. But how that is employed, and how I think that adds, and also how this is very much a French film. It is in English, but it is a very much a French film, because of its locations, and also because of its story and settings, etc. And so it is very interesting to see the way that this element of, as I say, the world stage is presented here. And I think it's done rather well, because we're given different locales and palettes. Again, is it also studio bound? Very much so, and that will work for some people, but that won't work for others, and I acknowledge
Yeah.
that. And so I don't, I'm not here to say that you're going to love Topaz. I think it's going to be the greatest thing, but actually there's so much to really love and admire about this work. And I will say also, just as a follow-up final comment before we move on, which is that I hated this film when I first saw it many years ago. I hated it. I thought it was dull, boring, flat. I thought it was, and I guess maybe I still am. I'm not sure, but I was, especially when I was younger, I had this sort of arrogance about me, and so I was very snobbish, and so I thought, oh, this is just a waste of time. My goodness, blah 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 blah. Okay. But then when I got that box set, the Blu-ray box set, which with that film included, and starting to slowly see Oh, this the way that, especially how characters and information are introduced, and the flourishes of the undeniable Hitchcock style, uh, and seeing those there because they are there, oh so much, and then it slowly began to grow on me, and so now I find it's a fine little film. It's a great film, and it's not the best film ever, and it's a great film, but it has a lot of flaws, but imperfections, right? They are what make up a lot of things in our own lives. And
Yeah,
so, right? What's an imperfection or two or three or more, maybe in the case of Topaz, but
right.
still, what's an imperfection here or there? It's still a Hitchcock film, I think, and it's a Hitchcock film that, as I say, is also very experimental. So Topaz, just check it out if you can.
Yeah, I think, and it, again, I think it's such a great point to challenge yourself with a film. I mean, there's some films I've watched the beginning that I didn't really like, and then I revisit them, and I really think, hey, this is a great film. I missed some things in here, and it could just be the time, or as you were saying, you know, your attitude at the time, because maybe you had seen some other Hitchcock films that you liked a lot better. When you saw it, you were like, this doesn't really, you know, this is really not up to the standards of what you had seen before. And so I just think that's a great point in general about watching films. Like I said, I feel like I'm really challenged in some ways because there's so many things I want to watch and study, and I feel like there's only so many hours in the day for me to do it. So um, so sometimes I'll start to watch a series of films, and then I'll be potentially distracted by a TV show or distracted by a Netflix, you know, something on Netflix or something else that I'm studying. And so I think as collectors, this is a challenge too, that we may not always see all of the films. We may only get to a certain point and then have our favorites, and we're satisfied with our favorites. But I think what you bring up is absolutely excellent. We should continue to challenge ourselves and watch maybe films that we hadn't heard of, or films that we hadn't seen in a long time, or films that we maybe passed over for some reason. And I think that happens all the time. So I'm so happy you brought that up, and I like this area of discussion too, because I feel like when I talk to other people that enjoy watching films, it's a constant challenge, right, with your watch list and what you're focused on and what you're doing. So again, thanks for bringing it up. That's great. So I have one final one.
Please, please.
And it's interesting that none of our choices overlapped here today, but I'm glad, because I think that also sends a message to say that there's so much of Hitchcock's work that you can really enjoy, and your favorites may change over time. But my last one is a real popular one. It's number one for me right now, and it's Rear Window. And that's also on the box set here too. And I can watch this movie over and over again. At this point, it's my number one favorite Hitchcock film, which again can go back and forth, and maybe it's tied with Shadow of a Doubt. But there's so many things I love about this film. Jimmy Stewart being one of them, Grace Kelly being the other one. Thelma Ritter is just amazing in the movie, and you know, just it has all of the great Hitchcock elements in it. I think it's a popular choice if you're starting off with Hitchcock. This might be one to start off with. I think as much as you were talking about Topaz too, sometimes it's hard to realize that Hitchcock started off in silent films, and so sometimes if you were to watch The Lodger, let's say at the beginning, you might not necessarily appreciate, uh, you know, everything else in his filmography if you were to start off with that one, let's say, because there's so many great things to love, you know, to love about The Lodger, but many people are more oriented towards Psycho, Vertigo, Rear Window, The Birds, and things like that. So, but Rear Window, even from the opening shots of the film, Hitchcock is so brilliant because he tells you everything about the character that you need to know, coming in very close on Jimmy Stewart's face. And he's at home. He's had an injury. He's got a cast on his leg, but his name is written on the cast. You see a broken camera also in the first opening minutes of the film as well. So you know what his occupation is, you know where he's living. And he set up this kind of voyeur type environment where Jimmy Stewart is looking out on this apartment building with many different things going on in the building, and it's just fascinating to watch, and you realize how much you yourself might enjoy watching those things. I know for myself, if anybody's seen my videos, I have a line of trees outside my window that I use as the opening for my videos on my channel, and I love watching the trees. And so that's my rear window out there, but there's no apartment building or anything, but I love watching those trees and how they change and things like that. I love watching the nature out there too. But I think you realize that everyone is interested in what everyone else is doing in some way. And so it's characterized by Jimmy Stewart seeing a crime occur and how he gets involved in that. I think also, for me anyway, I was just talking about this today, I was thinking about this today too, that Grace Kelly's in the movie. And when Grace Kelly comes in the first time, it's breathtaking. I mean, the scene of her when she comes in and gives Jimmy Stewart a kiss at the beginning, when you see her face, the way he does it, it's absolutely takes your breath away when she comes in. And the thing I think that I found most interesting about this latest watch, and I've seen the movie many, many times, is that Jimmy Stewart as a character is resistant to Grace Kelly in a way. They're having a relationship before everything's happening with the crime and everything that occurs and the mystery that occurs in the movie. It starts off in this relationship, and he's got this beautiful opportunity of a relationship in front of him, and he's resistant to it. He fights it all the way because it's not what he wants, right? It's not, he wants to be off somewhere taking photographs in jungles and things like that. And Grace Kelly she wants to be in the city, you know, and so, but she's in love with him at the same time. And so there's this idea of, here's all these things that I want. It's almost an It's a Wonderful Life type scenario, right? I want to do all these things. I want to go out do all these places, but you've got this beautiful thing right in front of you. You've got this beautiful situation. Grace Kelly's beautiful, of course, but it's the situation of it, I think. He's got a chance to have a relationship with someone and have a partner in life, which I think is so important. And he resists it all the way until this crime occurs. And maybe at the end, you're not really sure too, but maybe he realizes that everything he ever wanted was right in front of him all the time. And I think that's such a common story as well, embedded in this crime story too. But that's the thing I really took away from it. And maybe that's part of my age too, seeing it again so many times and seeing the value of that relationship over everything else that Jimmy Stewart wants, right? And he has to go through a trauma. He has to go through some transformation to get there. So I just think it's a brilliant film. It has all the elements we've talked about already tonight, which is these overlapping stories, a mystery involved, the shooting of the film. Thelma Ritter also brilliant. She's got a few scenes in the movie, but she points it out too. And I think I may have some quotes here too, that she mentioned, but along the lines of Shadow of a Doubt. Let me see if I can find those quickly too. Not sure if she says, this is Thelma Ritter, okay? Nothing has caused the human race so much trouble as intelligence. I think that's a brilliant line, and it's something we're going through today, isn't it? Right? I mean, if you think about it, a lot of the lines in the script, again, you're going for the mystery story and things like that, but when you listen to the words, when you hear the script, there's so many other things. It's so multifaceted. It's just brilliant. So I'm sure Rear Window. I'm sure you've seen that many, many times.
Oh, have I seen Rear Window?
Yeah,
yeah. Oh, yes,
I'm
yes,
sure.
I have. Yeah,
many, many times.
And so, no, that's a well stated, explanatory, and comment on Rear Window. And I enjoyed that very much. Yeah, I'm right there with you. And we have so many aspects of the world that Hitchcock seems to be, the world that he seems to be creating. One of which being the way that he uses enclosed spaces, limitations of environment, and also the way he uses characters that we think we know, but in fact we've never met directly. And this is the big metaphor of Rear Window, what we see in the apartments across the way and here and there, and what we don't see, of course. And this notion too of privacy, and how this peeping Tomism, and and I know a lot has been made of, and as you point out rather I I agree with you 100% here. And a lot has been made, of course, about how the relationship uh, between the James Stewart character and the um, 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 why am I forgetting? um, uh,
Grace Kelly
Grace Kelly,
or
thank you.
Grace
Lisa,
Kelly, yeah.
yes, yes, thank you,
Lisa, yeah,
Grace. Yes,
Lisa.
I was forgetting Grace Kelly's name. Yes, I couldn't believe it. Yes, maybe I was overwhelmed by the moment that you were mentioning about how she emerges for the first time in the kiss. Yes, so I was yes, I lost track of my own
It
comments
took
there.
your
But
breath
Grace
away
Kelly,
there
yes,
too.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. So Grace Kelly. So yes. Um, the relationship between these two characters and how they seem to be maybe at odds or parallel to, or maybe they're alternate universes or whatever you want to call it, in the many different scenarios that we see played out all across the way there. And so there's a lot to be read in each of these things in the stories. And of course, at the center of the direct narrative is one particular story right there, and that occupies our attention. And of course, there's a lot that has been said about the way that the windows represent film frames, and it's like watching different frames
Yeah.
and things like this. So I get all that analysis, but uh, what is again, that's another remarkably experimental approach, because we are in essence dealing with something that's similar, I think, to Topaz, which is different characters that we don't really know. We don't hear their dialogue directly. We hear echoes, we hear things, we get a sense of it, but we don't really follow directly what
Yeah.
their stories are, and yet we are able to follow each of their stories so well.
Yeah.
And so they are sort of like oblique short stories, and a lot's going on at the same time. And so it's like one of these almost like art installations. But I always say it's like it's art installations in a museum where you have different stories happening at the same time. It's almost like Andy Warhol.
Oh, very
And
much so.
so
Yeah.
and I think it's I always find Hitchcock's work, especially Rear Window, to be very much like on the cutting edge. And they're Hollywood. I mean, he's made films outside of the Hollywood system, of course,
Sure.
but he also made them squarely inside the Hollywood system. And it's so amazing, like a film like Rear Window, which is a classic. It's from the classic period, but it's so unlike a typical classic Hollywood film.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, there are many traits that are very much of that typical golden age of Hollywood type of thing. And so I think it has its feet squarely planted in both camps rather nicely. And plus, as you mentioned, it's a wonderful story. But again, it's been spoken about so many times. I don't know quite how to add to the conversation, except to say
Well, I think
perhaps one thing, which is like it has. I'm a dog lover, and there are some things about dogs there that I think are very very cute, and also very like, wow, my goodness, what's going on here. So
yeah.
there is that. But I'm sorry, you were saying yes.
Oh no, I was just going to say that this is one example of really Hitchcock, you know, to the extreme manipulating the environment, right? Having a set where you're watching all these stories happen, and as you say, you can pretty much follow the stories that are, you know, you may be interested in, you know, an apartment and what's happening there, and your mind just kind of goes to that story, and then you're brought into another story, and you know, it's very interesting how your mind does that when you're watching these things. And you know, you're correct, you can kind of keep all these stories going independently, wondering what's happening with the couple downstairs, forget about the main story even, right? You're interested in, there's a lady that's courting you know, three men in another apartment, what's happening with her, you know, there's a guy playing the piano. We didn't talk about this too much tonight either, but you know, Hitchcock famously appears in his films too, and I think even some of the later films he would appear very early in the film so that you wouldn't be waiting for that. But in this particular one, I don't know if we want to give it away, but he happens to be winding a clock in this one. And I thought that was particularly interesting too, because he's kind of playing with time in a funny way also, and talking about this idea, which we talked about in Shadow of a Doubt, where, you know, today's the thing, right? Today's the thing, right? Watch what's happening right in front of you. See what's happening in the present. The past doesn't matter, the future doesn't matter. It's all right in front of you. Look at it. And so I feel like that's, I see that very clearly, I feel like, with this movie. And again, the direct manipulation of having a set built for him has all these things in it that has to be choreographed, is just, amazing. And it's a film that I could really see over and over again. And I'm sure I'll watch it many more times in my lifetime. So.
Great. That is absolutely great. Yeah, I love that. That's a great list. So Rear Window, Shadow of a Doubt, Psycho, and The Birds. Yes, that's great. That is great. Are there any runners up, or let me ask you two questions at once. So, are there any runners up, and are there any films that you haven't seen that you'd like to see by Hitchcock? So, two questions at once.
Two questions, yeah. I would like to review some of the later films, like we talked about, because a lot of the later films I've kind of ignored them because I've been focused on the others. I will say
what? Like what you, when you say later films, what do you mean in particular?
Like I'm trying to think.
Like Topaz,
Topaz is one of them. Marnie.
Okay, Torn Curtain, Family Plot, Frenzy.
So some of the later, some of the later films I definitely need to study in more detail, and so those are ones that are in the set for anyone that wants to know too. That that you can get to. But I would say runner-ups are, and I pulled those as well. I wasn't sure if you're going to talk about these, but this is a big runner-up for me too. Notorious, which has a Criterion release, and there's the front and back of that one, and then of course Rebecca, which we talked about a little bit. These two I think would be runner-ups for me. But I mean, there's so many that we could talk about. 39 Steps and the original version of The Man Who Knew Too Much. I like that quite a lot. But I mean, there's so many, right, Daisuke? I mean, we could do a whole other video on other Hitchcock films because I just love all the films that I've seen of his. So now, do you have any other runner-ups too that you've been thinking about or that you really like? I know you like Vertigo. I know is very popular too.
Oh, I think that's great. Yeah, and I would also say I was struggling with this, so I wanted to pick Sabotage. It's a very early film, Sabotage, which is such a classic. Or Stage Fright. That's another it's maybe underrated.
Underrated, yeah, for sure.
And I also enjoy, if we're talking about the later films, Frenzy. If you have you seen Frenzy?
I haven't seen Frenzy.
Okay, yeah, I need to see that too. Yeah, I would strongly recommend going there because that's we're entering into familiar territory on the one hand, and yet some not so familiar territory on the other hand, and so it's a very interesting experience. So there's Frenzy, and gosh, there's one more that I was thinking of, but I guess if we were to go to the silent films too, then I would have loved to have talked about Blackmail, because I think Blackmail that's one of my favorites, in fact. And there's a lot of really almost shocking character manipulations in that film that I think are very striking, especially given its time period. So I would have loved to have talked about that more, but maybe we can make room for this another time. We didn't speak a lot about the silent films, but
and like you were saying, there's so many, right? So, but anybody new to Hitchcock, I don't know if we wanted to. I think anyone new to Hitchcock, there's such a wide range of films we talked about tonight too that I think there's some good choices in there to start out with, whether you want to start with maybe some more popular ones or maybe some that haven't been talked about. I'm so happy you talked about some of those too. The Wrong Man is one of my favorites too, which I don't really think is talked about enough, with Henry Fonda, and I really love that film. And sometimes, you might, as you're watching films, you may not be able to see them all for whatever reason. So it's good to find some that are kind of those hidden gems, if you will. So.
I agree. Well, that's great. Thank you so much for this, and I look forward to our further conversations about this. But before we go, Dave, I do want to ask you. I know also that close to October, not quite there yet, but we're almost there. And so there is a lot of Halloween themed movies in the air, a lot of horror themed films in the air. And so before we go, perhaps could I ask you, do you have some parting recommendations for us, films that you are rather keen on of late, or any Halloween themed recommendations that you want to share with us before we go?
Absolutely. And so, and I wanted to say thank you so much too for this opportunity. It's been so great to talk with you. You and I've, connected in, many different ways and sharing thoughts about film. And again, as I said, I just love your channel. So, so thanks for, having me here tonight. So I have 4 things to show here at the end. And one of them is some films that I've watched. I watched all of this series for this Halloween, and that's the Scream series. This happens to be Scream 4, but there is a Scream 1, 2, 3. I think there's a new release on Blu-ray coming out, and I pre-ordered that. It hasn't arrived yet, but I've seen all the 3. But the thing I like about that series, just as more of a modern, is that it does reference. It is very referential on Psycho and Halloween and other horror films too. So those are some films I've enjoyed. Probably Scream 1 and 2 and Scream 4, I think, is a really good. And of course, we've heard the news that Scream 5 is going to happen at some point in 2022. So I don't know if you've seen those, but I happened to watch them this year. Sometimes you rotate Halloween films over the years, and I hadn't seen these in a while, so I really enjoyed those. Have you seen those, Daisuke? I'm sure you have, but.
So, sorry, the Scream films?
Yeah.
Yes, I have. Yeah. I'm a fan of those. Yeah. Please. So there's the Scream films, and then
the Scream films, and then I've got 3 other ones too. So this one I regularly watch. This is the Scream Factory release of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the remake from 1978. One of my favorite films from the 70s, and Donald Sutherland, Leonard Nimoy, and I just really enjoy this. A lot of times too. I mean, we talked about this today a little bit about something strange going on in your town. This is one of those types of films too, where you're not quite sure what's happening, who you can trust, and that type of thing. So I love the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and this is a great remake. One of the other, I don't know if you wanted to comment on that, but or I can keep going here. So the other one is Young Frankenstein, Mel Brooks. More of a kind of a lighter film, but I definitely watch it every year. Highly recommend it if you haven't seen this. I just love Mel Brooks, and I love this performance. I was really surprised to realize this is from 1974, which I think when I watched it last year, I really thought it happened later, and it really happened in the 70s. So again, one of my favorite films from the 70s. And the last one, and I think this one is kind of a hidden gem as well, is this movie called It Follows. So I don't know if you've seen this one, but I really like this film. I believe the style in this film is great, and so that's one that I regularly watch every year. I'm not sure why exactly I like it, other than I like the style of the movie, and I like the mystery of the movie. And so I don't know if you've seen that one, but
yeah, I was able to catch up with that, and I must say I enjoyed it very much. I thought it had, as you say, it has a very interesting concept, and the style is quite. It has a very catchy style to it, and it's really it has a nice vibe to it. I thought it was very atmospheric. Yeah.
There's one other film too that I'll mention real quickly at the end. If you have Netflix, or if any of your viewers have Netflix, one of the best films I've seen this year is a new Charlie Kaufman film called I'm Thinking of Ending Things, and it's on Netflix. And I found it to be one of the best films that I've seen all year. There's a little bit of controversy about it. People think it's a horror film. It could be potentially considered to be a horror film, but I found it very engaging, and I think it's going to win a lot of awards. I really feel like that. I love Charlie Kaufman and his work, so so that might be of some interest. I just happen to think of that, and it's one of the ones. People ask me too, do you like any modern film? Do you like any films that you've seen this year? And that's one of them.
Oh, so I haven't seen this, so I've heard a little bit about it, but I must admit I haven't heard that much. So but okay, that's something that I'll have to check out too. So
yeah,
oh,
absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, those are great suggestions and recommendations, Dave. Thank you so much for that. And so thank you so much for your time. This was wonderful. This was wonderful. And we'll have to continue the Hitchcock conversation as well as others very soon. But in the meantime, my friend, where can people find you? And what do you have planned for Halloween and the like, where people can find you? So could you give some information about where people
Sure.
can find you and your upcoming plans there?
Sure. Yeah. So my YouTube channel is Cinema Dave Media. I'm also Cinema Dave on Instagram and Twitter, so you can find me there if you want to follow me there. Um, I'm right now, as you can see in the background, I've got a couple of new shelves that I have. So I'm currently organizing my collection. So there'll be some videos on that. I've got another shelf too. I'm finally getting to the point where I've had some time to really organize things, and so I'm focusing on that. And then we're going to be watching Halloween films. I'm also doing a study of Twin Peaks. I'm doing a rewatch of Twin Peaks, and I'm halfway through season 2 on that. But I'm going to watch Firewalk with Me and then season 3, which I haven't seen. So that's, to me, Twin Peaks is very fall related, it seems like, and so I'm really enjoying that rewatch. And those are pretty much the immediate plans that I have. I'm really interested. Many of the the film community on YouTube and Instagram is so great, and I think we're all we all seem to influence each other, especially with collecting. And so I'm increasing my collection with Indicator Films, Kino Lorber, Warner Archive, Masters of Cinema is a recent. People have been asking me if I have any of those titles, and I don't have any yet. So that's an area of excitement for me that I'd love to collect. And so I think, again, as collectors, right, we spend a lot of time trying to build up our collection, finding about new things, watching new things, and it's it seems never ending, but very enjoyable for sure. And I really want to say thanks again for having me on your channel, and I really consider you a very good friend. I love your channel, and I'm so inspired by what you do on your channel and all the interviews you've been doing, all the videos. I watch those constantly. So thanks for all that amazing content that you provide.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And well, thank you. Really, thank you so much. And yes, and so that's great. And so Cinema Dave Media is the name of your YouTube channel. And so that will, of course, be in the description box below, just in case anyone needs to that link. So just check out the link and subscribe and comment to the videos and right, you know what you have to do.
Questions, yeah, questions, comments, yeah.
Fantastic. And of course, other information as well. So, Dave, thank you so much, my dear friend. This has been so much fun, and we will talk very soon.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Daisuke. Thank you.
Thank you, and take care.